In 1959, in Papua New Guinea, a 31-year-old Anglican priest and 37 other individuals, including his staff and parishioners, witnessed one of the most compelling UFO sightings in written history. This is a close encounter of the third kind that even impressed the famous J. Allen Hynek. This and more coming right up.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Cole.
Tonight we have a very nice episode for you.
Ooh, you switched it up.
I switched it up. I think last week I said we had an extraordinary or very special. That's what it was last week. But what we really have tonight is a fascinating episode. And we're going to be covering the UFO sighting of a Reverend William Gill from 1959. I've heard about this case before, and the deeper I dug into this thing, the more fascinating it became. We're going to get to that shortly, but before we do, Jimmy, what have you been up to this week?
Let's see. You know what? I delivered the contest winnings to the winner.
The prize.
The prizes. Yeah. Turned out it was a local person, so I was able to just drive over and hook up with them and hand it off, and they were really excited to both get it and seemed incredibly nice and was happy to meet me. So that was pretty cool.
Sign any autographs or anything while you're over there?
I didn't have any of my headshots with me, so you know, I now know what it feels like to be an F-level celebrity.
A minor celebrity, very minor.
Yeah, minor in terms of short.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was the first thing? You told me this before. What was the first thing she said when she met you?
I think one of the first things she said, wow, you are short.
Yeah, I thought you'd be taller.
I thought you'd be taller. And that's something from Snake Plissken or whatever his name was from
no,
Escape
that
from
was
New
one
York.
they all said, I heard you were dead.
I heard you were dead, yeah.
Yeah. There is another one where they said, I thought you'd be taller,
yeah,
be
or
bigger,
I thought you'd be
something
bigger,
like that. Yeah.
I
don't remember that movie. Wonder how tall I sound.
That's Roadhouse. I thought you'd be taller. You probably sound like a leprechaun. Garth.
Maybe. All right, so
well, anyway.
Good to know the first contest, the first Cosmic Sponge giveaway was a success, and we have a happy listener out there. Thank you to everyone that entered the contest. We plan to do another one soon, so stay tuned, and we will give details later.
Yep, I think we'll have one for Christmas. I think that's perfect.
The Christmas giveaway.
The Christmas giveaway. We'll talk about that.
Well, sounds good. So you got any news items this week?
I do. So I was looking for some interesting news items, and I didn't find anything that really stuck out.
Yeah, kind of seems like a little bit of a dry week. I've been struggling to find stories to post on Facebook this week. Nothing going on as far as I can see with cryptids and Bigfoot. I look for Bigfoot news every day. It's just not always there.
There's not a lot there.
He is elusive.
He is.
An elusive creature.
It's hard to find his. It's not only hard to find him, it's hard to find stories about him.
Exactly.
He's probably got some kind of campaign of people who go around and stamp down anybody who tries to talk about him.
Maybe.
You've been talking about the foot. I hear you've been talking about the foot.
Well, what you got on the way of news?
Well, this is statistics, so I think we probably should keep talking about Bigfoot and how elusive he is. So a new survey.
Let me get my pillow.
Yeah, get out your calculator. A new survey found that 63% of people aged 21 and over believe in the paranormal in some form. Now, one poll of 2,000 Americans found that unexplained beings, it's unexplained creatures out there in the world, they believe they exist and they are ghosts. That's 57% believe they're ghosts. 39% believe they're visitors from another planet, and 27% believe it's Bigfoot.
Just Bigfoot for any unexplained phenomenon.
I guess, yeah. It was a ghost of a little girl. Must be Bigfoot. I don't know. They were really specific. A third of the respondents, 35%, said that they've felt an unexplained presence in their homes, prompting them to worry that they're being haunted by the paranormal. I felt that all through college, but it was just my stupid roommate. So that's what I got. I just found that really interesting that, 57% ghosts, 39% visitors from other planets, and 27% Bigfoot.
I don't quite understand that survey. What was the question?
No, they don't have the questions here. This is just results. They don't have like the written questions. At least I don't see them here. 55% believe full moons can make people behave in strange ways, like devouring chicken nuggets through a window at a drive-thru.
Oh, yeah. We have evidence of that.
Right. More than half love watching scary movies on Halloween. Oh, well, that's stupid. I mean, come on. 45% like to incorporate alcoholic beverages into their spooky celebrations. Well, for me, you could say you like to incorporate alcoholic beverages into celebrations.
Or just alcoholic beverages, period.
in daily living. And 51% like telling or being told scary stories. Only 51%? Really?
Well, it's like our friend Frank. He hates horror movies.
Oh, yeah, he's a big pansy. He doesn't like being scared.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, why would I want to watch a movie that makes me feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I mean, it's not for everyone. My wife and I love horror movies.
Yeah, your whole family is a little bit too weird
That's
on that
true.
side of things. I mean,
hey,
weird. Man, your kid was watching Psycho before I was watching Psycho. I was like 35 when I met him. He was like 7. He's watching Psycho. I'm like, turn it off, man. That scared me.
Well, this is coming from the guy that was scared of the Teletubbies. So,
hey, in my defense, they're Teletubbies.
Yeah, right. Okay. Anything else on that amazing survey that just apparently has random statistics about anything?
Well, here's
45% of Americans enjoy alcoholic beverages with Halloween. 51% enjoy scary movies. And, oh, by the way, anything unexplained is either a Bigfoot, UFO, aliens, or a ghost. But we're not quite sure how that all pairs out.
Okay, here we go. What do Americans believe in? 50% of Americans believe in ghosts. 39% believe in visitors from other planets. 27% believe in Bigfoot. 22% in the Loch Ness Monster. 22% in vampires. 22% in werewolves. You seeing a trend here? 22% in zombies. And 18% believe in the Yeti. Wait, the Bigfoot people don't believe in the Yeti?
No, I'm sitting there like the vampire, Bigfoot, and
I believe in the Bigfoot,
people,
but the Yeti, that's going too far.
Like, 4% of them are saying not the Yeti. No,
Bigfoot, sure, but Yeti, let's not get crazy.
Yeah. Why? Do I look like an idiot?
Well, yes, you do.
Well, it's probably a government conspiracy.
That's right, the Yeti. The only thing on that list that's a government conspiracy is the Yeti.
Right.
Nepal's trying to bring in tourists. It's a conspiracy.
All right, let me see what I got here. So I've got a story dated from October 27th. This comes from the New York Post, but they're pretty much recycling a story from the Daily Mail. There's some video that was obtained by the Daily Mail that shows a pulsating tear-shaped object zip around a pair of FedEx pilots. It was a cargo plane who spotted the UFO on March 19th, 2020 out of their windshield while they were flying near Monterey, though the interloper never popped up on the plane's radar. At one point, the brilliant yellow-white plasma-like object appears to rapidly descend from the sky to match the altitude of the two cargo planes, then flash a beam of light in their direction. The orb proceeds to zoom alongside the aircrafts for more than half an hour before disappearing with a flash of pinkish purple light. Footage of the encounter was later analyzed by experts at the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, otherwise known as NARCAP, a nonprofit group that studies UFO sightings and works toward developing safety protocols during such rare and inexplicable occurrences. In a nutshell, yeah, there's this video. I'm not sure what it was shot with, probably a cell phone. It shows a light. Jimmy, have you seen this video yet?
I have. It's a little crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like everything else, all these kind of videos, they always, you can't make out anything at all, really. I mean, it looks like a light. It looks like they tried to zoom in on it with the camera maybe. And I can't tell if the pulsating is from the camera maybe trying to focus
Mhm.
or not. It's almost it almost looks like a lensing effect to me, like of the camera going in and out of focus. But what do you think? You know a lot about optics and stuff, so
Could be maybe.
I
Again,
mean, I'm watching it right now.
it's one of those things too where you have to take into account also the observations of the individual
Right.
who was on site. The first officer, this is a Boeing 767 that they're flying, and the first officer believed that it was a meteor and began to say so when it suddenly stopped near the same altitude as their aircraft. So this thing's descending and then all of a sudden stops and then keeps pace with the plane for about 2,000 feet, going 575 miles an hour at 30,000 feet above ground.
Yeah, 37,000 feet.
37,000, that's right.
And of course, they ruled out any kind of weather balloon. They said all the weather balloons operating today.
Oh, well, of course they did. Next, you're going to tell me they also ruled out, temperature inversions. They always do that. They always say, no, it couldn't be a balloon or a weather inversion. Must
well,
be
I was
a
just
UFO.
saying, in this particular report, they said that the only weather balloon we have
doesn't travel at 575 miles an hour.
Well, that's part of it. They said it operates at 15,000 feet above ground level, and they're at 37,000 feet. So they're over twice the altitude of where this, I guess, what they might have thought it could have been when thinking it could have been a weather balloon or something. Well, one aspect of it, the videographer goes to the plane's radar to try and show plane and its relative position and how this object is not showing up on radar. Now, Mick West, who always loves to debunk UFOs, he believes that it may have been camera trickery caused by Venus's glow. But the pilots he was basically saying they saw Venus, which all debunkers always point to. He says, but the cameras told NARCAP that they saw the orb with their naked eyes. But anyway, it's pretty interesting. This story, I posted it to our Facebook page. So check out Cosmic Sponge on Facebook, and you can read the whole story and watch the video for yourself. And let us know what you think. Anything else for...
So I thought this was pretty interesting. People might be interested in it. It is the Perrin family returns to the Conjuring House for an epic Halloween live stream. Now, we're past Halloween at this point.
Today's November 1st as we record this.
It looks like this group that put it out, which is the Dark Zone Network, I'll put this on our Facebook page. You can go there and they'll have those live stream captured and they'll rebroadcast them so you can actually hear them. And for those of you who don't know, and we talked about this a little bit last episode, the Perrin family is the family and the house that the Conjuring movies are based on, at least that first film. I thought that was pretty interesting, something, the folks out there might be interested in. And the other thing, which I think for me was really exciting to learn about in another news article, was Australia recently had members of the parliament ask the their Defense Department, do you have a UAP program similar to what America had with ATIP? And essentially, as you go down and you can read or watch the conversation as it goes back and forth between their air marshal and one of the senators, essentially they say, nope, we don't have anything like that. We never have. We don't keep tracks of UAPs or UFOs, and no one's ever reported one ever.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know who's believing that, but the RAAF chief air marshal says, nope, nothing out there, nothing I'm aware of, nothing to see here. Move along, folks.
Yeah, move along. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I went back to the J. Allen Hynek book, which I'll refer to a little bit later in this podcast. This happened in Papua New Guinea in 1959, the case we're going to be talking about. And J. Allen Hynek does a piece in this book that he published in 1973 about this and discusses the RAAF and also the RAF, which is the Royal Air Force of the UK, the RAAF, Royal Australian Air Force. I think New Guinea was under Australia in those days.
Mm-hmm. It was
pretty clear that all of those other governments sort of followed the lead of the United States Air Force. Everyone in the world, all the Western nations anyway, felt that the United States had more resources to put into this phenomenon. UFOs, flying saucers. They would always just refer to the United States Air Force. And I have a letter that if we have time, I'll cover it later. It's just funny you happen to mention that the RAAF. I don't doubt that they may have had reports that they turned over, but according to J. Allen Hynek in his book in 1973, they didn't do anything to really try and track UFOs or report UFOs. The government didn't anyway. Just the same as this FedEx flight. The FAA, they may have wrote it down in a log somewhere and said a UFO was reported, but they tell all these pilots to report it to a civilian agency because there's no government agency allegedly tracking these sort of things now since the closure of Project Blue Book.
Wow.
That's what we're led to believe. That's the official word.
This does not surprise me at all.
No, me either.
Right. So are we ready to get into it?
Let's get into it. But before we do that, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. If you want to reach out to the show, our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. And also check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Cosmic Sponge. You can't miss us. All right, now on to tonight's program. What we're going to be talking about is the Father Gill UFO encounter that happened in Papua New Guinea in 1959. This is also known as the Buenai incident, which is the village or the area of New Guinea, which was very, very remote at the time, is where this incident actually occurred. Now, Jimmy, I think you've done some legwork on this case.
I've never heard you say that before.
You want to give us a quick rundown of the Buenai Father Gill UFO encounter?
Yes, and I will start by just giving a little bit of background on Papua New Guinea. It was held by Australia after World War I. Prior to World War I, Germany held it. After the war, it was given over to Australia to keep an eye on, just to rule over it. It was pretty remote and undiscovered, and still is to some degree, unexplored region of the world. Think about maybe deep Amazon, but right there in Oceania. It's culturally diverse. 13% of its people live in urban centers. The rest live out and about in the wilds. There's 851 known languages in the country, of which 11 now have no known speakers. So that's today. Think about what it was like in 1959. So we have missionaries from Australia that have gone over to Papua New Guinea and have set up missionary centers. And that's who we're going to talk about today, is a Father Gill, who was running a mission in Buenai, which was a remote section, a little section away from their main establishment, somewhere around the Bay of...
It's good something, right?
Yeah,
good
enough.
Yeah, good enough.
Which I thought was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And now we're going to get started with the story. We're going to start with Father William Booth Gill. He was a missionary from the Australian Anglican Church, and he headed a mission that was established in Buenai, Papua New Guinea, which at the time was a territory of Australia up until 1975, when it gained its independence. On April the 9th, now this was before the actual sighting we're going to talk about, this was the first time that he observed strange lights, and they were located at Mount Pooty. And not Pooty, Pooty.
Pooty?
Yeah, I'm not going to spell it either, but Pooty.
Come on, man, spell it. Now, that's one that you really should spell.
Okay,
because it sounds like you're saying Pooty, but are you saying Pooty?
I'm saying Pooty. It's Pudi. Pooty. It might be Pudi. I don't speak whatever that language
Good enough,
is.
Man.
Yeah. So he's coming back. He's been out going around and visiting an outpost about a mile from shore. At about 6:50 in the evening, he spots a light high on Mount Pooty, which is uninhabited. And it looks like it's coming from a Tilly lamp. I did not know what a Tilly lamp was, but I imagine Steve probably knows what a Tilly lamp is. He knows all those archaic terms. You know what a Tilly lamp is, Steve?
I don't know what a Tilly lamp is.
I had to look it up. It is a kerosene lantern, a high-pressure kerosene lantern. I think it was popular at that time for remote locations. Anyway, he thought it was odd that someone would be that high up in the mountain that late at night because, it's an uninhabited section of the island for the most part. He looked away, and 5 minutes later he looked back up and noticed that the light was gone. And then, he looked back away again, and maybe another 5 minutes had passed, and he looks up again, and he sees the light again, and it reappeared about a mile east of where it had been when he had first seen it. And he thought that was entirely too fast for a person to travel. And later he thought, well, maybe, just maybe, I saw a UFO. On June the 21st, Gill's assistant, Steve Moy, saw an object shaped like an upside-down saucer over the mission. At that time, Gill dismissed the sightings as being caused by some sort of natural phenomena. He was a skeptic by nature. And on June the 25th, he even wrote a letter to his close friend, the Reverend David Dury. He was the acting principal of St. Aidan's College at Dogura. He wrote that to be included with this report of Moy's sighting. And in the letter, he basically says that he believes people were seeing something, but he himself hadn't seen anything, and he would need a lot of proof before he believed in this visitors from outer space theory, and even signed the letter doubting William. So just to punctuate his thoughts on the matter. But before he even mailed that letter, he himself had a sighting, which happened on Friday, June 26, at about 6:45 on a Friday. He was walking outside the house, which was the primary building there at the mission, when he saw this huge light. And he called one of his students over, an Eric Kodawara, and asked him what he saw to confirm that it was a light. Now, I assume he asked that because he was nearsighted, and maybe he didn't have his glasses with him and having difficulty seeing, or perhaps he just wanted confirmation that his eyes were not deceiving him, that he was actually seeing something in the sky, and he just wanted confirmation from another person. He knew that Stephen Moy was interested in these things, so he asked Kodawara to go get Moy and return with him so he could see it as well. Kodawara leaves, and he returns with Moy along with a large group of people that he had collected on the way as he had went to go get Moy and return with him. They all walked out into the playfield, and it was at that point that Gill thought to run, and he grabbed a notebook and pencil. For whatever reason, I guess cameras were very expensive in those days, something a priest didn't have around with him at the time, so the best he could come up with was a notebook. At least he had the forethought to grab it. He decides to log down with dates, times, and details everything that occurs that evening. They see that there is a patchy cloud cover, which he estimated the cloud being 2,000 feet or so. Moy confirmed they weren't looking at a star. And then, at 6:55, Gill recorded seeing an object move on top of the object they were looking at. He discerned something that looked to be a man. Two other figures appeared, moving and glowing and doing some work on the section of this ship that they thought might be the deck of this ship. And they describe it as an upside-down saucer. At 7:10, Gill records four figures and a thin electric blue spotlight that came on and off. At 7:20, he says the UFO goes through a cloud, and at 8:28, he recorded the sky had cleared up, and he saw a UFO and called station people. The UFO appeared to descend and get bigger, and then 8:29 and 10:50, he recorded clouds were forming, and he saw a couple of other UFOs, one over the sea and the others coming and going throughout the clouds, reflecting light like a large halo to the cloud. And there was another big one that was large and stationary that he called the mothership. He numbered the UFOs 1 through 4, with the mothership being number 1. And then at 9:05, he wrote that 2, 3, and 4 were gone. 9:10, that one had gone overhead into the clouds. And then at 9:20, the mothership was back. At 9:30, it was gone. So this continues on all the way up to about 10:50. At that point, the sky got very overcast, and there's no sign of the UFO.
I'm looking over some excerpts from his notebook right now. It says 10:50, very overcast, no sign of UFO. 11:40, heavy rain, data sheet of the observation of UFOs. It says signed William B. Gill. Yeah, pretty much everything he said, these excerpts. All the way from 6:45, noticed the light. 6:50, called Stephen and Eric. 6:52, Stephen arrived, confirms not a star. And so what they're doing is they're making notes of everything going on. 6:55, send Eric to call people, one object on top moving, man. Now 3 men moving, glowing, doing something on deck, gone. 7 o'clock, men 1 and 2 again. 7:04, gone again. 7:10, sky, cloud, ceiling, so on and so forth. And then they see the men and the electric blue spotlight, which they say 45-degree angle up into the sky is that blue light. The object apparently was glowing all the whole time they saw it as well.
And that's on Friday, June the 26th. It doesn't stop there. The next night, Saturday, June 27th, a nurse from the hospital reports seeing a large UFO. So Gill arrives again at the playfield with others to observe it. In a report on this night, Gill stated that there was daylight remaining for about 15 minutes, and they could see the object clearly. They saw 4 figures on top. There is no doubt they were human. He stated there were 2 other stationary UFOs present, one over the hills to the west and one overhead. Two of the figures seem to be setting something up, and then another figure seemed to be looking down at the people on the ground, Father Gill and the rest of them.
And just to interrupt briefly, if you look at the drawings of them, it looks just like a floating platform based on the drawings. A floating platform, 4 little figures on top, and 4 landing legs protruding out from the bottom is the way it looks. It just looks like some kind of floating platform. So who knows? Maybe intergalactic tourists.
Could be. They really couldn't make out precisely what they were doing, but the way they interpret the movements of the figures on the deck, where it appeared as if 2 of the figures seemed to be setting something up or working on something, and the other 2 figures were observing the people on the ground and at times disappearing, presumably below deck, to do some other task. At one point, Father Gill waves at the figures up on the platform. To his surprise, one of them waves back. At this point, all of the people below start to wave at the figures above, and they wave back. At one point, Gill has Kotawara to go get a flashlight, ask him to go get a flashlight. They call him a torch because British and Australians, who knows, they're not really torches, they're flashlights. Torches have fire. Come on, my Brit friends. Anyway, he has Kotawara go and grab a flashlight. Kotawara brings it back, shines it up at the deck of the ship, giving Morse code-like signals, and then he just rocks it back and forth. And when he rocks it back and forth, the ship responds. At some point, the figures apparently lose interest in the people on the ground, disappear below deck, and at 6:25, 2 figures reappear and continue with their former activity, and then the blue spotlight came back on for a few seconds, twice in succession. At 6:30, the group on the ground just go for dinner. They'd already observed this for many hours the night before, and they'd already observed it for a little while prior to dinner. At 7 o'clock, Gill reported that the number 1 UFO was still there, but appeared somewhat smaller. The observers went to evening song, and when they came out at 7:45, visibility was very poor. There were no UFOs in sight. The last night of sightings occurred on Sunday, June 28th. Was not so dramatic, but Gill recorded first 1 UFO at 6:45 and then at 11:20 a loud bang on the mission roof as though a piece of metal had dropped from a great height. And he observed 4 UFOs overhead. Gill would later state that he didn't necessarily associate the noise with the UFOs, but included it in his report just in case it had some significance. And that is essentially the story of Father Gill.
The last time that they saw this craft, he did report as they were observing it that it shot away at great speed, never to be seen again.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, what I want to do right here is I want to play an audio excerpt of Father Gill describing this. This interview, I believe, appeared in an older documentary from the 70s. It also appears in a more recent documentary. Is this in The Phenomena or one of the other James Fox films?
I believe so.
It may be in the History of UFOs. I can't remember, but it's in a more recent documentary as well. But it originated from a UFO documentary from the 70s. But anyway, let's play it right here.
Can you imagine what it's like to look up in the sky and see a totally foreign-looking object there just hovering, not very far high up, maybe 200 or 300 feet up in the air, and glowing, and 2 bipods jutting out from behind it, from underneath it, and sparkling all around, and some figures up there. This solid-looking object, and figures walking about on top, and not the slightest noise whatsoever. And so we waved. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get this object down onto the playing field? And as we waved, wondering whether we'd get some recognition and whether perhaps they would understand what we wanted, they waved back. So I asked a boy to go quickly down, bring me torch, bring me pencil, bring me paper, and return as quickly as he can so that I can get any other events that occur and minute-by-minute movements, so that at least we'd be able to talk about it the next day. And this he did very, very quickly. He brought it back, and he brought the torch and put the torch on and shone it to the craft. And as he did so, he waved moved the torch this way. And we were dumbfounded when we looked at the craft, and the craft was as though it was responding to the torch. It began to do this too, like a disc-shaped object, just moving the same way, responding to the movement of the torch. Next day, just prior to the evening service, about 7 o'clock, the thing was there again. It had arrived about an hour earlier, and we all decided to have the normal evensong that we do have on those nights, because, the thing was out there outside the church anyway, and we felt it wouldn't go away during the service, and it didn't. When we came out, there it was, still up in the sky. And so for another hour or two we watched, and then suddenly it did go, and there was this amazingly incredible speed that the whole craft disappeared to nothing across the bay in a matter of a second or so.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if they came down upon the playing field? But
it sounds just like him.
But anyway, as you can hear, Father Gill sounds so sincere when he's talking about this. It's like, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful to meet some people from another planet, or whatever he believes them to be? He never really says. It's another recording on YouTube. This one is as well, of course. Yeah, I'm not sure when this was recorded, but it was sometime after that, and it's in England in front of a UFO group. It lasts 43 minutes, right at 44 minutes. And so we'll post a link to that, but he goes through the entire thing. It was a lecture he gave in the UK regarding his observation. There's a lot of detail there. One interesting aspect of this is, of course, this happened in June of June 26th.
June of 1959, the 26th, 27th, and 28th. Prior to that, throughout 1958 and 59, there were quite a few sightings of UFOs reported that year in Papua New Guinea. It sort of sets up, in some sense, the expectation or the hope of seeing a UFO by the locals there, and particularly people like Father Gill, who, while a skeptic, or claimed to be a skeptic, had friends who were very interested, like his friend Norman E.G. Crutwell, who was very interested and was a close friend of Father Gill's. There was some hope or expectation of seeing something, and a lot of what Father Gill saw prior to the June sightings were just basically lights in the sky. Presumably, he was knowledgeable enough to be able to identify things like Venus, for example, and discount it as one of the other lights that he saw that he attributed to UFOs.
What happened in the direct aftermath of this? How was this reported? How did this get out? How did this become public?
Well, the letters, before they would go off to his friend David, would inevitably go to his other friend, Norman Crutwell, first. At the time, Crutwell was out and about doing rounds to various missions and other places that he was responsible for. Eventually, however, Crutwell receives the letters and includes them in some writings that he put together titled Flying Saucers over Papua. This was passed around privately and then eventually published in Flying Saucer Review, special issue number 4, August of 1971. Those copies are rare and valuable. So if you have one, send it to me. And one site has it available for $290. But 18 of the total 45 pages can be viewed at the Black Vault. So if you don't have that money, you can still read it. Crutwell collected reports of 79 sightings in Papua, 60 with a question mark in the report, being in the area around Boyanai. And the witnesses ranged from government officers to native villagers. So you just can't write this off to uneducated masses.
Yeah, and it was something like 38 witnesses, right, including...
On those June dates, correct.
I think almost all of them had signed statements saying that this was true, what they saw. There were other drawings besides the ones that Father Gill made.
Correct.
Interestingly, J. Allen Hynek, now if you don't remember that name, J. Allen Hynek was the primary scientific consultant to Project Blue Book, the United States Air Force's investigation into flying saucers and UFOs that was closed in 1969. But J. Allen Hynek had worked with the Air Force since the very beginning, investigating UFOs. He looked into this, covers this story in his book. And a few episodes ago, I think I'd mentioned I'd read this book. It's called The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry, published by J. Allen Hynek in 1973. In the book, he discusses this case. Now, this book, first of all, before we get into it, this book is broken up into, he has ratings, like weird strangeness rating, believability rating. Being a scientist, he has all these like charts and graphs and how he designs. He, along with Jacques Vallée, were the ones that came up with the idea of first encounter of the first kind, first encounter of the second kind, so on and so forth. Well, this is considered a first encounter of the third kind, which he covers in this book. It's one of the stories there. And of course, if you haven't guessed it already from the movie, first encounter of the third kind is when you not only see the UFO up close, but you also see the occupants. He discusses in the book, and I'm going to just try and jump around here just a little bit. He discusses pretty much what we discussed right now, but he also said he first learned about it in 1961, so this would have been 2 years afterwards. I first learned of the case in detail when I stopped at the British Air Ministry on an official visit from Blue Book in 1961. I learned at that time that the British military view of the UFO problem was essentially the same as that of Blue Book. Indeed, the British and other governments as well were looking to the U.S. Air Force to solve the problem. I was told quite bluntly that with the funds and facilities available to the U.S. Air Force, there was little point to their doing anything about the problem, and they honestly felt that the U.S. Air Force was doing something about it, but with negative results. The British Air Ministry did not take Father Gill's sighting seriously, and almost with relief, they gave me their report on it. It had apparently been cluttering up their files. Since then, I've had access to a full report on this case, and then there's a footnote here because you can read the full report if you want, but we'll not get into that here. Before judgment is passed on this affair, Reverend Gill should be heard. As a few excerpts from his tape show, Reverend Gill is utterly sincere. He talks in a leisurely, scholarly way, delineating details slowly and carefully. The manner and content of the tapes are conducive to conviction. One would find it difficult to believe that an Anglican priest would concoct a story involving more than 24 witnesses out of sheer intent to deceive. Critics of this case do not generally know that this report is only one of some 60 in the New Guinea area at approximately that time, all investigated by a colleague of Gill, the Reverend Norman Crutwell, who has written a report covering the series, only one of which, the case in point, involved humanoids. And of course, again, this chapter's on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The Department of Air, Commonwealth of Australia, however, was in doubt, although I have no record that they interviewed Father Gill in person. They wrote as follows to a colleague. Dear sir, I refer to your letter dated 12 November 1969 concerning an unusual aerial sighting in Boinai in Papua New Guinea. The RAAF could come to no definitive conclusion on the report, and inquiries with the United Kingdom and the United States could add no clues or answers. As a result, these sightings have been classified as aerial phenomena, but most probably they were reflections on a cloud of a major light source of unknown origin. And that's pretty much all the RAAF had to say about it.
Those guys work hard.
Yeah.
They're busy flying their planes and wearing their cool hats and scarves. So does Hynek talk any about the additional steps that Gill took after the night of the 26th beyond his journal entries?
He does the two letters that you've already covered, where the first letter he wrote to a friend where he says, I don't know if I believe in these things, and signs it Doubting William, as you had said. And then the very next night, it says, life is strange, isn't it? Yesterday, I wrote you a letter expressing opinions of UFOs. Now, less than 24 hours later, I've changed my views somewhat. Of course, there's that letter.
And he labels that one Convinced Will.
Yeah, right. Convinced Bill.
Yeah.
And then this is all from his speech that he gave in front of the UK about turning the corner. You already covered all this in your telling of the story. There's a telling of the story, excerpts of the notebook that you covered. His conclusion on it was, although I did not personally investigate the Gill New Guinea case, now one of the classics, quote, quote, I am impressed by the quality and number of the witnesses and by the character and demeanor of Reverend Gill as revealed by his report and tapes. And then he goes into a little bit about Dr. Menzel of Harvard, who was an open critic of UFOs. And it's in the appendix, his entire letter. That's where I told you earlier when we were doing the research on this, I said somewhere I'd read his whole letter. Mm-hmm. It's in this book. So gotcha. I have it in the appendix, and we'll cover that. And of course, in a nutshell, Dr. Menzel said he must have been squinting, looking at it, without his glasses, seeing Venus or something. But in the report itself, it says the UFO was under cloud cover more than once, that the clouds were above the object. Couldn't have been a star.
So Gill actually goes a step further after the night of the 26th. He and 3 witnesses, all teachers, including Moy, Dulcie F. Gayarobo, if I got that wrong, sir, I apologize, and Ananias Rotaro, went to separate parts of a well-lit room and made drawings of the objects that had humanoids. In addition to those drawings, he got 27 of the 38 witnesses to provide signed statements of what they'd seen that night. And then, in order to estimate the size and distance of the object, Gill started with the assumption that the humanoid figures were average human height. Then he found a student that size, that approximate size, had him go across the field until he was the size of the figures that he had seen at distance, and then measured that distance. And then, using his hand as a reference in the position he had held it up while observing the object, chose a school building which fit within his hand's 5-inch spread, had it measured, and found it to be 35 feet. This guy was the perfect UFO witness. This is what you want all your UFO witnesses to do, other than just stare at the sky with their mouths open going, oh, that's neat.
Yeah, still though, man, I'm a little, surprised there's no camera available. I mean, I think everything they did was great and very detailed. And you're right. That's the way it needs to be done. Went back later, tried to determine the size of the object, how large the human or humanoid figures were on the craft, and all those things. It's beautiful, very thorough, but no camera.
Nah, they probably had one. It was just probably made in China.
No, maybe the film was all shot up by then. Who knows?
In 1959, Chinese kids weren't quite as good.
I don't know that anybody was trading with China in 1959.
They probably just had one of those really old cameras where you had to stay still for like half an hour. And you put your head under the cloth and you pull a thing and it explodes. So, yeah, they didn't, no camera. So we just have drawings, the journal entries.
Drawings.
Yeah, and then, that's pretty much all we have. So if it's not a legit UFO, what are the skeptics saying?
Okay, so I have the entire appendix that Dr. Menzel, he was the first big UFO skeptic to come out of the flying saucer phenomenon in the 1950s. He wrote a paper on December 20th, 1967, and I have the whole thing. But I'll tell you what I want to do is I found an excellent write-up on the interwebs. Hang on a second. It's actually on Quora. First write-up about it, I guess somebody asked the question about the UFO explanation in Bonai, Papua New Guinea in 1959. The first write-up's by Kaiser Tarafdar, a physician at the Covenant Medical Group. And he does a real nice write-up on the whole encounter. But then after that, there's another write-up by an individual named Donald Soryu. And he really addresses each point and then the skeptics' answer to it. And he also talks about Hynek's reactions. Now, J. Allen Hynek, in the book, he has things called the strangeness rating and probability rating. And it's a scale, again, scientific scale he came up with. And Hynek's strangeness rating was a 5, and his probability rating was an 8, meaning that he believed this happened pretty much. It's the highest one rated of all of his close encounters of the third kind in this book that we're talking about. Let's look at this part right here. It says 6:45 to 6:55, Reverend Gill spotted a bright white light to the northwest above Venus. About 37 more observers gathered, including educators Eric Langford and Stephen Gill Moy. It approached to about 500 feet, changing to a glowing yellow or pale orange. Gill noticed that Venus was below and to the west or left of the UFO. To address that specific point, Harvard astronomer Dr. Donald Menzel found it suspicion that Reverend Gill's final report did not mention the position of Venus at the time of his sighting, but it did. Menzel argued that Reverend Gill and Stephen Gill were both myopic, had appreciable stigmatism, and were unlikely to have been wearing corrective glasses at the time of the sighting, or they would have recognized that they were simply observing Venus. The movements of their own eyeballs account for the apparent motion of the planet, and atmospheric effects account for its rapid changes in color.
Man, if we're going to make assumptions, let's say, my name's Dr. Menzel. I'm just going to assume that the two people there were wearing helmets backwards, were wearing football helmets backwards on their heads. And
yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, they weren't wearing their glasses.
They're facing the opposite direction.
And then Hynek addresses it. Hynek says, Dr. Menzel neglected to ascertain that the UFO at times was seen under cloud cover. Venus was pointed out separately by Gill, and Reverend Gill was wearing properly corrected glasses at the time. All right, so 7 to 7:20, the object was silent, as large as a grapefruit, held at arm's length. It appeared metallic and circular with a wide base, a narrower upper deck, and projections that looked like legs beneath it. Talks about the electric spotlight and cloud cover and the men on top. So I'm not going to go over that. We already talked about that. Here's another piece of skeptical critique based on Gill's letter. This is from Philip Klass in 1974. Suggested that his report on the sightings was an attempt by Gill to please the director of another Anglican mission in Menipie, Reverend Norman E.G. Crutwell, who was interested in the UFO phenomena. Crutwell eventually wrote a paper on the Gill sightings and 64 others that occurred in the region in 1959. Klass subtly used Crutwell's own words to intimate that the Papuan natives, in turn, signed the witness statement to please Gill without fully understanding what they were signing, and found it suspect that Crutwell had offered no explanation for the 13 who failed to sign the statement. Here we go. This is Philip Klass always wants to focus on not the people that signed it, but the people that didn't, right? It's like wants to draw doubt to it. Like, why didn't it? Well, maybe the other 13 weren't available. Maybe they couldn't write. I don't know. Who knows, right?
Maybe they didn't see anything.
But and of course, nobody really wants to call the Reverend a liar, you know? And especially when you hear his audio testimony. I mean, he sounds so sincere. And being a religious person, obviously a missionary, a leader of these people.
Yeah, he doesn't want to burn in hell forever.
Nobody wants to call him a liar, even somebody like Philip Klass, although he's very close. Dr. Menzel in 1967 condescendingly argued that the Papuan natives, conditioned to miracles and the like, signed a document that they didn't understand in order to please their, quote, quote, great leader, their, quote, holy man, Reverend Gill. The differences evident in the drawings between Gill and Moy are further evidence of their myopia as far as Menzel was concerned. And then for Gill, when he's presented with this critique in 1977, said that Norman Crutwell was a colleague of Gill's and had no authority to instruct Gill. So it's like, he had no authority over me. I wasn't trying to please anyone. It's just, that's the way it was. It said that, moreover, the Papuans were bilingual in English and Wedao, or Wadao, I don't know how to W-E-D.
Oh, you're spelling stuff now.
W-E-D-A-U. Wadao. I get their native language. 12 of the 25 who signed were adults and all knew what they were signing. Also, the differences in the drawings are due to variations in our inability to draw, according to Gill, who felt that there would have been real room for criticism had all the drawings been identical. In any case, the important things are there. The general shape is there, the figures on the top are there, and the shaft of light. That some of the observers did not sign the witness statement indicates that Gill wasn't the great leader who had been followed, Reverend Gill said. Gill also made it clear that the Papuans were well on their way to independence at the point in time in 1959 and actually resented European authority, yet none of the non-signatories reproached Gill later with doubts or differing accounts. What's more, if they were conditioned to miracles, which miracles had preceded this? The miracle they would like to have seen, most of them, was for me to disappear off the face of the earth and let them get on with running their own district, Gill added. Okay, now they have the nurse who spotted some skeptical critique. It goes on, and again, these skeptics like Menzel and Philip Klass,
they're lazy.
They don't talk to these people. They don't ask them the questions themselves. They just write a paper. I mean, the one by Menzel saying, well, he must have been looking at Venus and he didn't have his glasses on. And in the appendix, let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, basically he says, I isolate Venus in the sky. I was wearing my glasses.
Yeah, I mean, and then here's the thing is Menzel says that what must have happened, he was looking at Venus without his glasses. He was squinting his eyes. And because he was squinting, made the object flatten out, and that the figures he saw on top, the 4 figures or so on top, were his eyelashes. And that is in Dr. Menzel's report, his critique, the Harvard astronomer.
Harvard man, you say?
Just a total oversimplification of...
He sounds like he cheated off of the person next to him to get through Harvard.
I get it. People want to be skeptical and want to find a logical explanation. But to me, and Philip Klass, he always looks at it, every single case. I mean, we've seen it when we've talked about him in the past. He always looked for somebody being deceitful, that they're trying to pull something over or trying to perpetuate a hoax for money or for whatever. And that's always going to be his explanation. That if he can't explain it under... well, it was an airplane or it was a helicopter or it was this thing that we can easily explain and say that's probably what you saw, then it's automatically a liar. That's just always going to be his response, or at least everything I've read so far.
Yeah.
But to me...
Go ahead. Because I have a skeptical thing that I think fits the bill and makes a lot of sense of it.
All right, well, let me just say this then.
Sure.
Since I'm talking about J. Allen Hynek, that is someone who was a very open skeptic, a very skeptical scientist who tried to look for logical explanations. Through the years of studying this phenomena, by the time the mid-60s arrived, he became a believer. He just saw too much evidence, talked to too many people himself, and took these reports, looked at photographs, looked at all this evidence. And he talks in the book, about that he wrote in the 70s about how sometimes it was uncomfortable for him to admit this, but that he knew there was some kind of strange phenomena going on with UFOs. There was something here. There's something here with this Father Gill case, according to him. And frankly, I trust his opinion over the other scientists who don't even interview the witnesses and just read the report and just come up with some half-baked theory that's either calling somebody a liar or they weren't wearing their glasses. I guess all 25 witnesses wasn't wearing their glasses either.
Yeah, when I looked at this, the thing that stood out to me is really what stood out to me was Father Gill was absolutely certain that the images he saw were humans. That was my first clue. The next clue is, so there's this mirage effect called Fata Morgana. It's Italian for this illusion that occurs out at sea, and it was really prominent in the Strait of Messina, where you would have a cold air above the ocean that would distort light as it hit people who were observing it from land, and it would cause this doubling effect, this inverted image either above or below the actual image. And that's what you would see. Now, some people have attributed this to a shrimp boat out in the harbor, and that's what they'd see. Now, it can't be that because there was no inverted image. But there is another optical illusion called a false horizon that occurs when you have the horizon which isn't observable because of a thin layer of fog over the harbor, for example, and it actually sets well beyond whatever you're observing. That very well could give the illusion of a ship, and where you're only observing the top part of the ship off of the ocean at a distance. It looks like it's way off of the ocean surface, when actually it's not. It's on the ocean surface. It's just that there's a large section of the ocean out to the horizon that is distorted to seem as if it's part of the air and not part of the ocean. That very well could have been what they saw, and they just saw some people in a boat working on the top of the deck and then going down below deck. Now, this is probably the best skeptical explanation for it. It would account for the fact that so many people saw it, so many people drew similar ships. Where we have some problems, you can even maybe make an argument that the speed at which it left was just the fact they turned their lights off or they were obscured in the fog. There are a lot of different things that might account for that. The most difficult part of it was the angle at which he observed the ship. He placed it at about 30 degrees. At that distance from the location he was observing it, that would be maybe almost impossible. So if he was accurate in that angle, almost impossible for it to be that. But I mean, that's probably the best skeptical argument for it.
Not bad. And that's not a bad explanation. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know. There's no video. There's no pictures. So we just have to go by the witnesses and what they say. Although this did occur over 3 nights. So that's something to think about for hours at a time.
Well, a ship coming back to harbor, unloading, doing their repairs on their ship. They're in the harbor. They're hanging out for a while. Could be.
And these same atmospheric effects is going to go on day after day after day.
I don't know. I mean, that's something I would really like to ask somebody who's more of an expert in those atmospheric conditions that would occur and allow this to happen. Maybe. Given it's the same time of day, you would expect it to happen consecutively over 3 days more than you would, randomly selecting 3 days out of the year, maybe. Because conditions might be the same across those 3 days. It happens. Right. So, maybe.
I mean, that's not bad. It's not bad still.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's some difficulties with it, again, because if Father Gill's correct in his observations that it was, one, that was at a 30-degree angle, and 2, if he had his distances correct, he put it at 35 feet, something like that. Maybe some of the shrimp boats, it's a little small for the shrimp boats that existed in the harbor at that time.
Well, if it's some kind of illusion anyway.
Right. Could distort the perception.
What about the spotlight that shot off at a 45-degree angle straight up into the sky that they could see?
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, you can make an argument that the ship did have a spotlight on it, to observe waters around it. And they were shooting it off for whatever reason. Who knows? But again, it is unusual. I don't know what to make of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I find it to be a fascinating case. There's so much detail there. The sightings went on for so long. I mean, let's face it, most of our sightings, most of our reports of UFOs only last a few fleeting minutes. At best. Here we have multiple witnesses describing something that went on for 3 nights, for hours and hours, where they had plenty of time to look at it, discuss it amongst themselves, and what do you make of that? So anyway, I think it's a very fascinating case, and if it is a UFO, if it is a flying saucer, what are they doing walking around on the deck? I mean, is this like here you see primitive civilization?
Hey, look at these monkeys down here. These tribes, it's sort of like that island off the coast of India that nobody's allowed to go on. That has those cannibal people. Yeah. It's like our whole planet's that for these alien observers, and they're coming down.
Yeah, that's what it sounds. Sounds like some tourists, a couple of people on a charter, checking out. Yeah, checking out the primitive Earthlings, and like some look more primitive than others, but see. These are trying to teach them their belief system and whatever.
Look at those guys down there. They don't even have a camera.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I don't know that I have really anything else to add. Listeners, man, this is a fascinating case, and we're going to include several links. I especially want you to, if you're interested in this case, listen to that long 45-minute interview with Reverend Gill. I mean, you can tell by the way he talks about it. He's not hoaxing or lying about this. I mean, everything that he reports, he believes. I have no doubt about that. J. Allen Hynek walked away from this one being almost 100% convinced. I mean, he gave the probability rating an 8 out of 10, which is very high for him. None of the other close encounters of the third kind, including the Zamora case, which he was pretty well convinced was something there as well. I think he only gave it a 5. I've got the chart here, but I'm not going to look it up. But of course, now Hynek at the time believed it was some NASA vehicle that they were experimenting with at White Sands, and that's why the Air Force was in such a big flurry to try and find this device that had landed there so they could say, look, public, this wasn't a flying saucer. This was actually a NASA experimental vehicle or a United States experimental vehicle, but they never found it because it didn't exist. So it's that's another fascinating case. But if listeners want to listen to that one, I'm not sure what episode it is, but it's the Zamora case.
Yeah, it's the one about the balloon.
Yeah, whatever. The balloon that apparently flies against the wind. Let's add that. So,
well, it could have had one of those Coyote rockets on it, Wile E. Coyote rockets.
Yeah, well, that's about as likely, right?
Right. He took it off his skates and put it on the balloon.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to add on this one, Jimmy? I don't know what else I have. It's a great case. I mean, we could talk about it and pull out all kinds of details all night.
I love it. And like you said, I think people should really watch the interviews with Father Gill because they're really interesting and they're just fun to watch. And it's fun to let your mind wander and think about the possibilities.
Absolutely. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they came down and landed on the playing field?
You just love the way he talks.
I went to church with him.
Man, I wish I had a cool accent like that.
I wish you did too. All right, man. Well, I say let's wrap this one up here. What do you think?
It sounds good
to me. Pen in it.
Definitely.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Don't forget to check out our webpage. We have the web store on there. Also, if you look for the little icon of the to-go coffee cup in the upper right-hand corner, it's called Buy Me a Coffee. Click on that and find ways to help support the show if you like what you're hearing. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Our contact is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Let us know if send us an email just to say howdy. Why not?
Sure.
Anything else, Jimmy?
Nope.
All right. With all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. Catch you next week.
Are you wearing glasses? Looks like you're squinting.
I'm squinting. I need new glasses.
Looks like little people walking around on top of the blinds.
Just in case you're squinting. Man, I see flying saucers everywhere I look. I must be squinting. Long eyelashes. Little people.
Yeah.
That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.